World Development System. Chapter 271. Finance Minister Joel was in a good mood as he had just concluded his deals with the various ministers and nobles the same day after he met Minister Plato. Joel murmured as he was planning to visit the ministers who were under Prince Hector, now only the real troublemakers of Prince Hector and Felix remain. I should first try to convince some of them of the benefits of this deal so they don't oppose it. If they are still adamant to oppose me, I might bring up their tax evasions later on in the court and their role in the previous war /U0026 its effects on Elias. And from the information, it seems they have lost quite a bit of money in the previous war. Their only consolation is the land acquired by Duke Norman during the previous invasion of Wildlands. However, I have to move carefully to not give them more information than that is required. I can only reveal the whole deal in the court tomorrow. Joel murmured as he thought about the contract in his hand. This deal with the sky is quite good for us, but only the point of selling of people is giving me some hunches. Maybe I should ask them to renegotiate when it comes to political news in their newspapers, or set up another newspaper called Elias Times Capital via their printing press. Yes, I can exploit these two weaknesses. They anyway have a shortage of people and abundance of land currently. Meanwhile, Alistair sighed as he sensed the people who were still tailing him all day long. He muttered as he saw the people. From the looks, Plato's men are tailing me quite brazenly, and there are some individuals who are hidden quite deeply. It seems I really can't do anything or meet with anyone with them chasing me. Should I really use force? Nah, it will expose myself. Most likely the people from Radiant Church have either completed their job or they either failed by now. I better check out the situation and report it to Prince Hector immediately. From the looks, Plato is prepared to move against Prince Hector. I better be prepared for some scolding by Master. Currently, Plato was preparing to dispatch Antonio with General Gildon and a team of escorts to Dolores. Plato spoke to Gildon before he left. You better be hiding your identity before you reach Baron Mendez's domain. This time a lot of factions are involved in this power struggle. Among all of them I have chosen to go with Sky, or else know that madman's way he would certainly try to again humiliate us. It was good that we had already made a deal with them before, or this assassination would have been all over northern states and then the whole kingdom. General Gildon nodded. I understand the importance of this mission, my lord. I will certainly fulfill it without anyone doubting our identity. We are anyway using a special channel to go to the north, so there won't be a problem. Plato nodded as he left for his office. Plato thought as he saw rushed footsteps by various people at the capital where ministers lived, I guess we just have to wait for the show tomorrow at the imperial court. Hector's wings will be cut, but the main problem of Radiant Church and Prince Felix will still exist. I guess His Majesty should be prepared for other princes to take the throne in the future. Currently, Mayane was having talks with her grandfather Amen, who was the head in the Ministry of Transport and Logistics at Lumeria. Mayane's grandfather, Ziggurat Amen, was quite amused as he heard his granddaughter, it seems you met quite an interesting character in Elias for the first time. However, you have to be careful of humans. The Radiant Church's influence is not to be underestimated. A lot of people hide their intentions. Mayane nodded and reported, yes, that guy certainly is interesting. It is not Elias now, it is Sky Kingdom where I am currently. They seceded after a rebellion broke out because of the imperial family's greed. Lord John was quite different from what I expected. I think he and his countrymen looked at us quite differently as compared to the other people of the continent. However, not all of them had the same eyes. However, from the way he made contracts, he was like us devils. It seemed he liked playing with words and teasing the other party on a later date. Ziggurat was quite stunned as he heard Mayane, a human who is comparable to us in making contracts? Can you tell me about the peculiarity of one of his contracts he made with other parties? Mayane nodded as she showed the laws of Elias and the laws of the sky before they seceded. Grandpa, please look at these laws of Elias and laws of sky before they seceded. They even clobbered a noble previously who was abusing commoners using these laws in their own domain previously. However, there is one thing I noted. Lord John looked at the contracts from a long-term perspective, unlike the other humans we encountered. What do you think? Ziggurat was surprised as well as stunned as he read both of the law decrees. It seems, he planned to secede from the day he was made a lord. Damn, this guy is quite sinister and cunning in circumventing the laws just to clobber those nobles, ha ha ha, now this man seems quite interesting. Okay, tell me from start to finish about his rebellion. I want to understand his nature first before we proceed to do business with him. Just from looking at these, I can see that he abhors the idea of slaves and hates those nobles. After hearing about John's rise and his rebellion, Ziggurat nodded seriously and spoke, "From this, I am certain that this guy was a commoner previously. He most likely lived in a village where other species lived jointly but in poverty. Well, it seems his overall nature is good from the way he treats his people. From the way he has shunned off the slavery law in his domain it can be seen that he is quite determined. Determined enough to fight against the whole world if he has to. However, with this, gods will take notice of him as they consider the rule of hierarchy as very important. Well, he seems quite compatible with us devils. We once shunned gods because of their stupid hierarchy system as we preferred power." Mayane nodded as she came to the same conclusion and spoke, "Now that you speak about him, there were quite a lot of joint villages which were rooted by the royal family and the Radiant Church during Prince Lukov's fiasco all those years ago. Lord John's origin may have come from these villages, and also this guy has always distrusted other people, whether it was the imperial family or the Radiant Church or anyone who showed slight malicious intent. And most importantly, this guy cares quite a lot about his people and has never broken his contracts with his partners before he was noble or after he became one." Ziggurat was surprised as he heard Mayane. He has never broken any contracts? Now, this is surprising. It seems I will have to personally meet him at a later date. As far as the ships are concerned, you should buy it from them at any cost, since it will be beneficial for trade and for the Aman family, since we will dip our hands in the first pot of gold. I will arrange preparations on our ports for the same when your ships arrive with the goods. And since he likes to keep his word, you can start the preparations and buy offices for the Aman family at his domain. You can discuss with him for this cooperation later on. As for the crowning ceremony, prepare a good gift and you should formally introduce yourself to the other countries. As Sky is quite superior to others in the military as seen in previous war, you shouldn't worry about your operations in Sky at least. I will just need to keep the Diablo clan at our arm's length and not let them get any news on the new developments at Elias and Sky before full preparations." Mayane nodded as she asked, "Grandpa, what about the free trade he asked us for? Won't we benefit because of our superior products?" Ziggurat Aman smiled as he sneered and spoke, "As far as free trade is concerned, tell him to piss off. It is more like a bait he is throwing at us. Those other guys might be naive. But I am not. Just from watching his confidence, we can't agree to free trade since he has never broken a contract. You can have a wait and watch attitude as well when it comes to free trade. From my point of view, it will be equal trade. Additionally, I don't want other families to get any news on this development. If you are worried that he won't agree to sell his ships, you don't need to worry. Since he is willing to sell his ships to other countries, he would naturally agree to sell his ships to us, and if he wants to open up markets and since he wants to start a diplomatic relationship, he will certainly cooperate. Never agree on the free trade of all products. You can go case by case basis when you start making deals with him. Do you understand?" "Okay, I will go according to plan." Mayane nodded as she stopped pouring energy in the communication crystal. Mayane thought, "I wonder how lively the imperial courts at Elias would be right now." Mayane nodded as she orders Kane, "Keep your watch at Elias's imperial court. For now, I don't want to miss anything. As for the crowning ceremony which will be held in a month, prepare our people. I will be going to meet Taylor and settle some deals with him." Kane respectfully nodded and spoke as he left to give orders, "Yes, milady." Chapter 272. Duke Friedrich was coming to the Sky Kingdom from the volcanic mountains of his borders. Currently, volcanic mountains were bordered with Duke Norman's domain because of recent expansion and also with John's western domain. Duke Friedrich thought as he looked after entering the Sky Kingdom. It seems we have to move a lot of ballistas on our borders, at least the ones bordering Norman's domain. Well, it's good that John is Vlad's student, so he should give me some face when I propose to buy some of his latest weapons, hee. Duke looked at the commander of the escort team and asked, "What do you think? Would that coward and astute Norman attack our borders now that he has those ballistas? Or would he be on the defensive?" The commander named Lion shook his head and spoke, "Nope, no chance for now. Elias, for now, is absolutely terrified of Lord John's methods, and I don't think Norman would like to stir up any trouble at our border after the previous war. The imperial court at Elias is getting hotter now due to the internal politics and struggle for power over the blame of previous war, and they are now trying to get a way to acquire their hands on mana-restoring pills produced by Sky. Instead, if we can get more weapons from Sky, then we will certainly have leverage, whether it is against Elias or it is against the Demon King. We will gain more stability due to our good relations with Lord John. However, Demon King, Apollyon will get more cautious against us and Sky because of strength showcased in the previous war." Duke nodded as he too understood that fact, but he had a smile on his face currently. "Well, it is still better than our previous situation where we were always suppressed. I only fear that they will start supporting my brother Draco. Additionally, now we have a land connection to Sky which is in our favor. Well, Elder Ryan will handle Draco for now, so we don't have any immediate danger. Come, let's see the kingdom of my future son-in-law." Ah ha 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 ha. The guards face-palmed as they saw Duke's occasional stupid behavior, but were quite accustomed to it as it loosened the atmosphere. Lion thought and spoke as harvest was near, but we still have the problem of food. Because of our demonic power, half of the fields are damaged and we are forced to plunder or hunt in wildlands. Though because of our strong bodies, we can work more, but it leaks out our demonic power to the fields when exposed for a long time, which ruins half of the yields. Duke Friedrich saw that there were a few workers working on placing the rails tracks as well as making roads on the other side. Maybe we can ask John to solve our problem and we can anyway plunder from the highlands and hunt beasts from now on since we have the ballistas. Ah look, from the looks of it, they are planning to connect all the villages and towns by roads from the way they are working. I didn't expect them to connect to the border villages in such a short time, even if they had the money to pay for it. As for those tracks, I heard from Vlad that John was planning to make a new transport system. I heard him call that Railroad Sea Transport System. It seems John is focusing most on the transportation system and electrification system. I wonder why he wants those useless common magic crystal mines when he has so much to do. Magic crystals from beasts is 10,000 times better in quality. These common magic crystals won't improve your power anyway. He should focus on agriculture since food and military is the foundation of any country from what I have seen from this continent's history. Maybe he can show us a different story with Sky, as his plans are all over the kingdom, whether it is agriculture, military, finance, or commerce. Commander Lion nodded and spoke, "True, Lord John may have his plans. And anyway we can earn quite a sum by selling those useless crystals mines to him. However, watching the work over here is quite incredible. We can take the road to the capital here from this border village. We will reach in hours since this road was said to be quite sturdy by our spies. These roads can carry a lot of load, unlike the stone roads we have in the Fire Abyss Kingdom. Let's get our black fire demon horse carriages on the road with our flags. We will be picking up our speed today to reach the capital in 7 to 9 hours, maybe even less, after watching the quality of these roads. From the looks of the fields, it seems the elves have helped them this time around. They need to expand their fields from the next year since they have a population expansion this year due to migration, and it is around 13M to 15M according to our estimates, since those guys at Sky Population Organization are keeping their lips tight and shut. According to my information, this population increase has been due to Lord Plato's plan in the previous war, where he hoped to squeeze the resources of Sky to take their technologies. But the problem of food was solved by hunting the wildland beasts, and currently, there are quite a few forests that are being handled by the Sky in case they need food in the future, both here and also in Aurora. However, I wonder how many millions of gold has Lord John spent on this infrastructure project. Maybe even 1 billion taels of gold would be insufficient if done all over the country after watching those rail tracks and roads. Duke Friedrich nodded as he spoke. You shouldn't worry about his finances. I heard from Vlad that this time they have used all the material resources like steel, wood, concrete, cement, etc. internally from Sky. As for manpower, I heard they have used the central bank notes i.e. Sky dollars issued by John this time. That don't have the money yet, but he said they have quite a number of gold and platinum mines to pay them back in future, and anyway big trades involving big sums in Sky would be carried in Sky dollars only, so those workers and common people won't have to worry. Only the merchants who travel in and out of the country would worry about the Sky dollars at first, but after a few exchanges with the banks, they too are feeling assured. In addition, these banknotes save a lot of space and are more convenient. This time they even established banks all over the country in villages, towns, cities, and states. This time the government employees too were also paid in banknotes issued by the government, as they were told to encourage the people in using Sky dollars in the name of John. Many merchants too have started using the same currently, knowing the reputation of John. Even I was quite shocked by the boldness of John this time around. I remember that they have built quite a number of factories just for steel, cement, and also for the production of their railways. However, their chief engineer has stressed on the need of spare parts factories rather than those rail carriages. I wonder what kind of marvel would we see after this is completed. Though I heard from Vlad that currently those bills are supported by gold, but later on other resources too will be added to support Sky dollars like land, mines, magic crystal mines. I wonder what he is planning. He said that the common magic crystal mines are related to energy, since researcher Will and Tornwall recently had a big technological breakthrough in using magic crystal for their machines instead of the usual coal, oil, and other sources of energy. But it would be done only on a later stage, when people in the Sky Kingdom become accustomed and are comfortable to Sky dollars. Commander Lion, who thought himself to be quite educated too, was confused after hearing the Duke and spoke, this seems quite complicated even to me. So in short, currently Lord John is paying them from future income of their minting. Most likely he has found quite a number of gold mines and platinum mines in Sky to support Sky dollars, and hence he is quite confident in paying back via his banks. Maybe they found a number of gold mines at Aurora Island. I heard that island was quite rich in mines and minerals. And since most of the wages are paid to the workers in Sky dollars, they won't have to pay them in gold anyway, since they won't travel much out of the country. Plus John himself is using his own reputation, and hence those Sky dollars won't lose in value for the time being. As for the common magic crystal mines, he may have found some use for them, and hence he is betting on them. Speaking of banknotes, I noted earlier that Lord John is quite cunning in a sense that he semi-forces merchants to pay taxes in Sky dollars whenever they are crossing the borders, but gives them concessions on taxes as well if they use Sky dollars. So it seems like a carrot and stick policy. Duke nodded as he spoke in agreement. You too will become cunning after you own a fief to manage. A wise lord needs to be cunning. From this event alone, I can see that a lot of countries too will start issuing their own notes and force John to give his printing technology to them, or else he will be attacked by them diplomatically, and maybe they could use their spies on printing tech, since John would be hoarding their platinum, gold, silver, bronze, and copper coins if Sky dollars become common all over the continent. Maybe we can benefit from John's relationship and use it quite well, acquiring those printing presses for Fire Abyss Kingdom. However, the most incredible part about Sky's infrastructure project is that John didn't a dime of gold this time around, since everything was used from internal resources. Maybe they could have imported some materials, but that is negligible in front of this massive project. Now that is some high level of economic brilliance from John or his subordinates. At first, I too was skeptical about Sky dollars, but after reading Vlad's letter I understood the brilliance of this economic marvel. However, to sustain this he would always need food as a foundation. Because of expanding population, I am skeptical, since countries always keep a restriction when it comes to the export of food products and strategic materials such as magic metals. Well, he can always invade to plunder by waging war if he feels that he doesn't have enough food. Countries have always been like that. Commander Lion nodded as he thought about food and spoke, "True, but currently they won't have to worry much since Mist and Allison have already given their help to Sky, so food won't have a problem for 3 years since they have stocked quite a lot. Previously I heard that in the last harvest of North Frontier Town as well they had 7 times the yield as compared to previous years even without the help of elves. This time as well I expect the same, in fact more, since they have taken the help of elves." Chapter 273. Duke Friedrich furrowed his brows and thought as he heard about food yield, I also never expected it to come true. I guess this is related to that thing called fertilizer which Vlad spoke about. Maybe I should ask John about it and negotiate a deal with him for the formula. The food yield will serve as a good foundation for our duchy for the next 50 to 100 years. Since he is focused on common magic crystal mines, I can offer him one of the biggest mines from my duchy. I should also open a research institute like John with a group of experienced farmers and magicians who are interested in flora research specifically related to farming for better results in the future. Anyway, Lion, hurry up to North Frontier Town for now. I heard their new capital is still under construction and would be prepared in a month." Lion nodded respectfully and gave his orders to the escort team to hurry up. "Yes, my lord." At the same time, at North Frontier Town, Ambassador Luke was quite excited after he had completed his talks with Taylor, as this deal had quite a lot of benefits from him. He was currently preparing the ambassadorial manner for Finance Minister Joel, who prepared the deal, and Grand Duke /U0026 Defense Minister Plato, who broke through /U0026 negotiated with Taylor for the same. He thought and spoke to Ellison, "I guess there might be a big storm brewing up in Imperial City today, since this deal has the favor of Lord Joel, Lord Plato, and His Majesty Lionheart. I predict that Prince Hector would surely be having a rough day in Imperial Court for the first time, since he would be butting heads with Lord Joel and Lord Plato. And if Prince Hector is not careful and runs off his mouth, then he may get implicated." Ellison too sighed and spoke, "Isn't your father the Lord Mayor of Imperial City, so Prince Hector may contact him?" No, I spoke abruptly. "I guess Lord Mayor too has his fair share of problems when it comes to Prince Hector and Prince Felix, so Lord Mayor would certainly not be helping him out today." "Well, then Prince Hector's only hope is the Lord Prime Minister to save the asses of his men today, at least the ones who have their hands clean. If he is smart, then he will try to negotiate a deal with him." Luke shook his head and spoke, "Nah, knowing the ego of Prince Hector, he won't bow down and would only make a deal with his head high up when he is certain to make a profit. As for Prime Minister, he is a very cautious man in political circles according to my father, so he won't support Prince Hector easily. As for Lord Father, he has his own priorities rather than taking care of Prince Hector and complete this deal. I can see that a big storm is certainly coming up, since His Majesty is determined to complete this deal, since it is related to reducing the influence and finances of the Radiant Church, which has been eating away Elias for centuries. Anyway, this deal is good for our political career currently, so we should be focused on welcoming Lord Joel and Lord Plato currently." Ellison nodded and spoke, "True, even Lord John is quite cautious against religions taking a root and amassing influence /U0026 political power, so he always keeps them at a bay, and that is especially so for Radiant Church." Luke thought of a conversation with his father and spoke to Ellison, "You see, in my experience previously, Lord John is a shrewd person and looks from a long-term perspective. In the last rebellion as well, he was baiting the Imperial Court, Lord Plato, His Majesty, and Lord Fjord with their greed for a long time, while at the same time he was using Prince Hector's grudge against him to incite Elias against him the whole time. When he gave up those ballistas as well, he was already prepared with other stronger weapons to resist us in a righteous tone when a perfect opportunity presented. When he set up the newspaper, we thought that it was a loss-making venture and had no use, but his true goals lied in his political goals with the use of newspapers and embarrassing Prince Hector to scheme and wage a war against him. The royal family too ignored the influence of this newspaper in the North Frontier City, because the North Frontier City was far away in borders, and they thought that this was only a personal vendetta between Lord Count John and Lord Hector at that time. So in my opinion, Lord John planned his moves quite meticulously with a long-term perspective to amass influence among the populace. Even Lord Plato previously commented that we were neck-deep in greed, which was aimed to lose our rational, which was a net spread out by Lord John so that we attack him, and then via his newspapers he influenced the people of North Frontier Town to a breaking point about the politics which was going on between Lord John, Prince Hector, Duke Fjord, and the royal family, and the thing was we couldn't sue him as there wasn't any law previously which could prevent him from publishing facts in his own domain. Only now do we have a law in the publishing industry. Previously the royal family simply controlled the Imperial Institute and the Elders /U0026 principles to control content which were against the interests of the royal family. In the last rebellion, I guess the breaking point of people at North Frontier City was the massacre of Greenwood's village with no action from the Imperial Court. And then the Imperial Court's stance with supporting the mercenaries when it came to the destruction of mercenary camp which was established by Prince Hector, not to mention the sanctions placed by the royal family on food purchase. So these were quite meticulous plans from Lord John with long-term goals. In Lord Plato's words, we lost quite bitterly against Lord John in all the fronts, whether it was politically, economically, and then militarily, when Elias lost the hearts of the people at North Frontier City who were supporting for the rebellion after the mercenary camp fiasco and food exportation sanctions. In this whole rebellion, the most important point was the hearts of the people that we lost, and hence no one here supported the Imperial Court or Elias, but instead were encouraging for a rebellion after watching the deeds of Prince Hector, the Imperial Court and the royal family. That small publishing company had so much influence in North Frontier Town. Even I was quite influenced unconsciously after reading for a long time, but since my interests lied in imperial capital I soon realized its importance before the rebellion, when people started getting courage to speak out against the royal family and ministers at the Imperial Court. In Lord Plato's opinion, this meticulous rebellion by Lord John was a big lesson for all the politicians in the Imperial Court and also the royal family. So from now on, they will also be considering the effects of their decisions on populace so that outer threats can't use it against us. Luke drank water as he continued in a solemn tone, so in my opinion, Lord John has studied the history of Elias and Fire Abyss Kingdom in depth and has come to the same conclusion as our top strategists, that he should keep the religions at bay so they don't disrupt social and political order in his country in the future. I am guessing that in the first opportunity, Lord John will ban Radiant Church completely in the Sky Kingdom when they create any sort of trouble. Well, the last rebellion was quite a lesson for me and others at Elias politically. At least now I know that the hearts of the people are very important politically, and now it seems His Majesty too is focusing on the same, as he doesn't want to see the repeat of rebellion of the North in the near future. The royal family will at least keep up their appearances and cover up scandals if they see any, so as not to affect their popularity. Ellison too was quite stunned after having this conversation with Luke, and thought, this conversation with Lord Luke is a good lesson for me politically and my future career. I guess a lot of shrewd scholars would already be studying the impact and origins of the rebellion of Lord John. I wonder what name would the future historians give to this event. Anyway, I better prepare for the arrival of Lord Joel and Lord Plato. After a few hours, they saw the Blucia family escorts carriages who came with Duke Friedrich. Luke furrowed his brows a little and commented as he saw the carriages, these demons are quite show-off when they enter any new territory. It's like it is their inherent nature to dominate anywhere they go. Ellison nodded and spoke, well, it's Duke Friedrich's Blucia flag, so maybe someone important has traveled this time. After looking at the escort and guard team, I guess they are here to witness the new policies and the peace trade deal between Elias and Sky. Melanie looked at Friedrich carriage from her store as she sensed a strong power. My, what are we looking at? Duke Friedrich himself has traveled to another country after such a long time. Must be an important occasion. Duke Friedrich, who was inside the carriage, signaled for it to stop and came outside after hearing Melanie, well, I just came early for my son in. I mean Lord John's crowning ceremony in advance. Maybe I will strike some deals with him. If possible I can invite him to Blucia Duchy. You seem more anxious about my arrival, old hag. You should go back to your lab. Melanie snorted as she sneered and spoke, humph, whom are you fooling? You think I don't know your means? I can also see that you will make him marry your daughter in the name of inviting him. You better don't try anything. Melanie continued and murmured in a very soft voice which could only be heard by Duke, anyway, he will become my son-in-law, you won't even know when it happens. Friedrich nodded and asked, you seem quite happy over here doing your research in Sky because of John's enormous funding. Won't you go to Elias where most of your members are feeling restless because of you and your great-granddaughter? I don't think he would mind if you go there, as I can sense that he knows of your strength after his rigorous training with Vlad. Well, you shouldn't worry much. I am only here on behalf of Blucia family and one deal of Fire Abyss family because John released those Sky dollars where we don't have any good understanding of this banking thing, and from the way he is emphasizing its importance I understand that it will be one of the pillars of his country at least. Anyway, see you at Sky headquarters. By the way, I just got some information that you should check out some news on the Imperial Court of Elias, as there is a show going on over there. Lion came over and spoke to Friedrich in a low voice, Lord, it looks like even the devils are here. Won't His Majesty Apollyon be pissed after hearing such news? Friedrich had already expected this to happen and spoke, you don't need to worry. They will still make friends with Lord John as it is in their interests currently. The power balance in this continent has shifted a lot and you will see it in the future. Our investment in John was the right choice. You see, most of the people here have different eyes as compared to others on this continent, and it is not just humans but all the other species here have something different. I guess it is the sense of identity which I only saw in the upper quarters of most of the empires, as their interests and sense of belonging were linked with the empires. Lion nodded and also felt a bit differently when he arrived at the North Frontier City. I guess that's true. People here seem to have more money to spend after watching them in person. Anyway, let's see Lord John in person, who brought this change to this city and now an empire step by step. After watching a number of businesses over here, I see that he focuses a lot on commercial activities in his domain as well. I guess this is the result of the policy of no taxes when you don't make any profits in your business in Sky, unlike other countries and nobles that tax straight on the sales price. Maybe we should do the same in our duchy, who knows, we can benefit from this policy. Additionally, the merchants too will be happy because of this, which will inevitably increase the number of merchants, which will, in turn, increase the amount of tax. Next time I will propose this, Lord Friedrich. Chapter 274. Currently, at the Imperial Court of Elias, there was a great debate and furor going around in the Imperial Court as soon as Defense Minister Plato gave his negotiated copy of a contract with Taylor representing Sky for a ceasefire and trade deal with Sky, while the policy was made by Finance Minister Joel. One of the ministers and nobles from Prince Hector's camp roared, as he had lost his son in the war and couldn't bear it in, Oi oi oi, does it mean that we are officially recognizing Sky as a country? How can this be possible? It hasn't even been 2 months since the end of the last war and you want peace already? Do you mean that we forgive those bastards who killed our men, family members, and soldiers? Unforgivable. I won't accept this no matter the cause. I simply can't stand this humiliation from that rebel. Prince Hector smiled as he had proceeded with Alistair's plan in the morning to incite the families of knights and nobles who had lost their kin in the previous war after hearing the report of the spy from his mother's family. Prince Hector meanwhile thought, it seems mother's family are hell-bent on opposing and won't oppose Plato and Joel on this matter. Minister Plato too smiled, as he had expected this scenario to play out and hence never revealed all the conditions of the peace trade deal to noble families, where nobles and knights too were captured by Sky and could be returned to them, or else they would be working as laborers with basic pay in Sky. Another noble from the neutral camp who hadn't joined the previous expedition too furrowed his brows, as he too had lost one of his sons in the previous war under the royal family's banner, which was under Prince Hector. He knew that other than his eldest son, every other son will try to gain favors from other princes to gain higher noble status and land for their future development, so he had expected if any of his sons lost their lives in the struggle for power. He thought calmly as he sighed and spoke logically and reasonably, so he won't be seen as biased. I think a peace deal currently is unfeasible. The war has only been finished and families have not even mourned enough. Not to mention the feelings of vengeance most of the families would have against Skye and that rebel King John. I think this peace trade plan is 5 years too early for us right now. A ceasefire under shadows is okay, but officially recognizing them is too early for us as well as the populace who lost their kin. The head of Magic Association at Elias, Warden, who was present today, spoke furiously after hearing the arguments of nobles who were hellbent on resistance. So you mean to say that you guys will detain us 5 years with a lack of mana-restoring pills because of your conflict with Lord John? Officially recognizing them would grant us special rights in terms of trade in mana-restoring pills, which is beneficial for us. Warden then pointed at the minister from Prince Hector's camp and roared, I dare you guys to stop this peace trade deal. Even if you guys can detain 100 or so top magicians, but other low-ranking magicians will certainly try to run away from Elias after hearing your nonsense. The results of the previous war were the result of your notorious adventures for easy money and conspiracy of your lord against Lord John. Humph. I still remember when we were debating on whether or not to attack Lord John or to handle this matter diplomatically. You were one of the first guys who wanted to jump on the ship called Hang Lord John and seize his industries. You guys lost your kin in the war because of your own greed. I still remember you were the first one who joined the previous expedition led by Prince Hector previously when Count John destroyed the mercenaries supported by you guys. If it weren't for me, we would have also lost a lot of magicians. You either make the mana-restoring pills, even if it is of low quality we will accept it, or complete this peace trade deal with Lord John. As soon as the nobles heard this rant from Lord Warden, it was as if they had eaten a fly and started cursing him for this humiliation. One of the nobles who had sent half of the knights from his household roared at him while pointing his fingers, You dare humiliate us nobles this brazenly in the imperial court? Do you have a death wish, old man? Old Warden simply ignored the idiot and looked at the experienced ministers for answers. At this time it was the finance minister who interrupted the fight and spoke, bringing the whole imperial court to silence. It was because he hadn't spoken for a long time in the previous meetings. His words carried a lot of weight and hence he spoke carefully every time in the imperial court. In addition to this was his power over the whole kingdom, whether economically or politically. He spoke very precisely. I think Defense Minister Plato's negotiated peace deal is good for us. I read it when they passed the documents to council. It seems that this deal is already accepted by Lord John, and the very fact that Lord John is willing to sell his medicines to us will be a profitable venture for us, not to mention the fame that His Majesty will receive in the whole kingdom for getting back the soldiers or cheaper healthcare services. I think everyone knows the expensive medical services by certain organizations in Elias and their monopoly. I think this competition is good for us, and since the royal family will redistribute these medicines, we can earn quite a bit while at the same time breaking the monopoly of certain profiteers. Though the situation is under control when it comes to treasury, I have still not condemned the people who bought the misery of war on us and ruined my team's policies for the next 10 years. Currently, our treasury is running low and is on a deficit. I don't think the nobles here would like me to unnecessarily investigate tax evasions so as to raise funds for our treasury. I think all of you should read the contract carefully and its benefits before opposing it. Well, that's all from me for now. Please raise your opinions and objections. Hiss. Everyone in the imperial court understood what the finance minister was implying. The very fact that the royal family's treasury was running low was a cause of concern, and many knew why it was like that currently and why did the finance minister choose to attack the military faction. They also knew that this proposal can earn a very decent income and also break the influence of Radiant Church, so no one chose to oppose Finance Minister Joel in this, as he would attack them later on if he was opposed to this matter by others. One of the noble who was on military faction with Prince Hector thought, damn, he asks us to raise our opinions and objections, but this, in fact, would make us his enemy. I am sure anyone who raises objections would certainly have himself investigated on tax evasions if it wasn't a business on their own territory. Watching this situation in the imperial court, Prince Hector was very pissed and signaled to his subordinates to reject this deal. Baron Jules and Marquis Polo, watching a chance to suck up to Prince Hector, raised their opinion. Baron Jules roared, I object, Your Majesty. I can't see any compromise with that rebel king. Everyone can see that it was his conspiracy from the start to rebel, and if we compromise, where would our dignity go? Marquis Polo too joined and spoke. This subject agrees with Baron Jules, Your Majesty. Minister Joel stared at them coldly as if registering their identities in his mind. It seems that I have to send them out of the capital to make them understand the consequences of objecting my policies. Well, I have already investigated these pawns. What I need is a majority in support and that clean baron to take the bait. From there I will start the overhaul in their faction. About 8 ministers joined Baron Jules in objecting to the proposal without reading it, while experienced ministers and nobles like Duke Norman, Queen Cecilia's family or neutral camp didn't object or raise any opinions, as they knew the consequences of being an enemy of Minister Joel would be very bad, while they also didn't know the intention of His Majesty, who hadn't spoken up until now. While Prince Hector wasn't happy with the experienced ministers on his faction for not raising an opinion, but he chose to keep his thoughts to himself, as he knew that these experienced ministers and nobles were quite shrewd and cautious when it came to dealing in politics. Chapter 275. King Lionheart, who had not spoken up until now, spoke after taking a glance at the peace deal, as he already knew about the contents. Minister Plato, please pass the contract to all the ministers and nobles. Minister Joel, please elaborate on the benefits and cons of this deal to everyone so that we can reach a better conclusion. Minister Joel smiled as he immediately understood the intention of His Majesty, while the ones who objected earlier had rather pale faces when they saw the intention of His Majesty. Some of them thought as they heard King Lionheart, it seems the situation of Treasury is quite dire, since His Majesty directed his intentions and asked Minister Joel to give his own narrative. As this policy was written by him, I doubt he will raise any cons and doubts about this proposal. It seems His Majesty too wants to pass this proposal. Minister Joel smiled with an understanding and spoke more freely. My policy consists of multiple parts. Currently, I have divided it in 5 segments. First is the construction sector. With that new item called cement from sky, we can construct buildings and infrastructure at a faster pace than what we used to do earlier. It would also be cheaper as compared to our previous methods. We already have a case study and results. I think all of us have already seen the results at Duke Rose's Ducky or even Marquis Steve's Pearl City. More merchants have traveled to Duke Rose's Iron Rainforest and Pearl City because of the reduced traveling costs and improved safety from bandits, which has inevitably attracted more merchants. It was only because of Duke Rose's southern domain's taxes from commercial activities that we are a bit afloat in the imperial treasury. From Duke Rose's duchy, compared to the previous year's tax of 31.12 million taels of gold, this year we received 121 million taels of gold because of increased commercial activities that were related to the construction sector. This has inevitably increased the average income of people, and this has also encouraged many people to create their own businesses. The prices of land there have increased by 3 times in capital of Iron Rainforest, and the port city of Pearl has increased prices by 2.5 at borders to 3.5 times at the main square. With this trend, I think Pearl City will become the financial hub of Elias in a few years rather than the imperial city. Second is related to healthcare. I think all of you previously already heard the benefits of distributing medicines and competing with light magicians who charge exorbitant prices, which is not affordable for commoners. This will also generate quite an income for all the nobles, ministers, and the royal family. I think all of you already know your competitors, Radiant Church. So as to compensate you guys, the royal family will redistribute the medicines that we received from Sky to the nobles and ministers to sell them in their own domains, since we won't enough channels in other domains as compared to locals. After hearing this, all the nobles and ministers regardless of faction smiled as they understood the intention of the royal family, while an ambassador from the Radiant Church had a pale face. He understood the scheme of Minister Joel, Minister Plato, and King Lionheart. However, some nobles who were on very good terms with Radiant Church had conflicted faces, as they would have a face-off with the Radiant Church, but at the same time, they didn't want to let go of this gold mine in the healthcare sector. When Prince Hector was again going to speak, he was stopped by Duke Norman and his assistant Alistair, who understood the gravity of the situation. They understood that this was a face-off between Elias, Sky, and Radiant Church, where Elias and Sky were collaborating to suppress them. Duke Norman meanwhile smiled, as he never had a good relationship with the Radiant Church for decades, since the Radiant Church had previously tried to poach his knights when he was fighting against his brothers for the title of the Duke decades ago, when his knights were suffering diseases which had cost him a lot. Duke Norman spoke gravely to Prince Hector after watching his previous behavior. "Your Highness, please keep calm. You should let Lord Minister Joel complete his speech, or it will be a very difficult situation for you. You wouldn't want to make Lord Minister Joel as your enemy and give him a chance to attack you. He has squeezed a lot of powerful nobles out of imperial court in the last decade who were against his economic policies. The only ones who have resisted and suppressed him completely are Prime Minister Haas and Defense Minister Plato. Previously in the last war, Prime Minister Haas never spoke a word on his approval or rejection of war, which is what displays his foresight and also His Majesty's trust in his foresight after the conclusion of the war." Alistair nodded as he heard Norman and spoke. Minister Haas had spoken privately that he always thought that Lord John was always provoking Prince Hector and royal family via greed, which meant that Lord John was prepared for a fight for a long time and was just throwing bait after baits. In his opinion, Lord John had the support of demons from the Fire Abyss Kingdom, particularly the Blucia clan. From his perspective, demons wanted the royal family to use the Dragon Knights to be away from the capital so that they can launch a good attack from the west. And this was one of the reasons why His Majesty never moved the Dragon Knights, even though he had his urges, and last but not the least was Lord Ian Red's ominous vibes and his visions. Meanwhile, Minister Joel continued, "The third is the most important collaboration is in the military. Previously we used to purchase expensive ships from Lord Fjord and state industries who were satisfied with mediocrity, and no innovations were made because of this. I think this competition would raise their competitive spirit between the state, Lord Fjord, and Sky. Sky has agreed to sell ships to us which are faster by 1.5 times as compared to Duke Fjord's ships. In exchange, we have agreed to sell them some metal mines and some common magic crystal mines. Later, after the peace deal, we will also have an opportunity to deal with mana-restoring pills because of this deal, not to mention reduced military costs at the borders at north, since it will be managed by Baron Mendez." After watching the silence, Joel nodded and continued, "Fourth is employment. Through the above proposed policies, it will create a lot of jobs in Elias, which will inevitably increase the consumption, leading to increased taxes by businesses. Though you people may not understand it, however, it will increase a lot of business and a lot of taxes. I will just give you one example: Duke Rose's southern domain, which has increased the prices of land by 1.5 to 3.5 times. The land taxes alone would increase by 1.5 times, which is very good for us. And this was done only by the construction sector. You can read the whole policy to understand this point in depth, or it will take much of your time." Minister Joel smiled sinisterly as he came to the main political point and spoke. "Fifth is if we refuse, we will be dragged back by 5 years because of the previous war and lose an opportunity to earn income in medical services. I think all of you understand my meaning. And last but not the least, here we have the list of names of prisoners of war which was given to us by Lord Taylor to Lord Luke. It was earned with a lot of difficulties by Lord Plato and Lord Luke to strike this deal, and if rejected, the prisoners might be working as slaves over there. I don't think any of you nobles would want your children in such conditions. By the way, General Endo too was captured while he was fighting Lord Blake, unlike some general who ran away. All of the soldiers can be redeemed by family members. The list is separated according to duchy, state, city, town, and villages, so it will be easier to find the kins. The families who can't redeem the soldiers will have the men who were captured work at Sky for 5 years. The families too can live with them in Sky if they don't have other sources of income and are on the verge of becoming slaves. Meanwhile, Lord John is buying people, not slaves, at the price of 10 gold coins, so this includes the families of soldiers who want to migrate to Sky for 5 years. I think with this deal, you guys can give a sufficient explanation to everyone in the domain while also pay compensation to families who lost their kin via this policy. And most importantly, if we don't make this deal with Sky right now and ruin our relations, then it would require 3 to 4 years just to recover from the previous war, and my future policies for the next 10 years would need to be scrapped as we won't have sufficient funds. I would most likely need to open up a lot of investigations to follow those previous policies. So please decide carefully now. Hiss. A lot of people who were still bent on rejecting the proposal understood the underlying meaning of the last statement and the threat it posed when it came to investigations. First is that the kingdom was doing this to combat the Radiant Church politically and at the same time earn quite an amount of money, while at the same time they can bring back prisoners who were captured in the war. And the second point, General Endo, who was the brother of Queen Cecilia, was in the list of prisoners. King Lionheart smiled and nodded as he looked at Minister Joel and spoke gravely to other ministers. As this policy is quite significant and holds the future of Elias, we don't have much choice, as we must accept or reject this proposal today. All of you guys have 30 minutes for discussion. After this, we will decide on the approval or rejection of the proposal made by Lord Joel and Lord Plato. At this time, Prime Minister smiled for the first time as he understood the pros and His Majesty's intentions, so he spoke immediately to give his stance. Your Majesty, I would like to approve this proposal since it is for the betterment of everyone and it is also save the sons who fought previously. We can't let them down. Minister Brandon, representing Duke Sapphire Rose too, smiled and spoke. Duke Rose's Manor too would like to give their approval on the proposed policies given by Lord Joel and Lord Plato. Finance Minister Justin of Duke Black Wolf too raised his hand as he spoke and furrowed his brows while looking at Brandon and Prime Minister who spoke before him. This subject agrees on behalf of Duke Black Wolf to the proposal of Defense Minister Plato and Minister Joel. This surprised a lot of people as they understood that Duke Black Wolf was trying to pacify Prince Lukov while at the same time earning some brownie points from Minister Joel, with whom they previously had conflicts when it came to taxes. Some shrewd ministers too followed the lead of Prime Minister, Minister Justin, and Minister Brandon, as they were anyway on the opposite faction of Prince Hector and military. Meanwhile, Duke Norman and some ministers on Prince Hector's faction had a conflicting face as they looked at those shrewd ministers and then at Prince Hector as they sighed and decided to give their approval, rejection, or abstaining after 30 minutes of discussion after looking at the intentions of other ministers in their own faction. Looking at this situation, Minister Joel smiled as he was quite satisfied with the reaction of ministers as he got a lot of face in this session, whether it came to Prime Minister, Queen Cecilia's family, Minister Justin, Minister Brandon, or other ministers. Plato looked at Joel as he approached him and spoke. You seem quite satisfied, Minister Joel. What are your plans after 30 minutes? Looking at the few ministers who were previously objecting to his proposal, Joel smiled and spoke. Well, I was intending to expose and impeach a few ministers who have done a lot of damage to Elias. I cannot let them go, can I? Joel's assistant understood as he called a bureaucrat for the show which would take place after the approval. Minister Joel's assistant took some documents from him and handed it over to a bureaucrat for the next session. Plato understood his meaning and spoke. Ha ha ha, true, we can't let evildoers who harm the state remain in power, can we? Looking at the meaning of both the ministers, everyone in the factions of Minister Joel and Plato understood that the next hearing would create quite a storm in the political circles of Elias. Joel nodded and whispered to Plato, meanwhile, do you think that Prince Hector has made any contact with Prime Minister Haas yesterday? Minister shook and spoke, nope, we shouldn't be worried today. And after hearing this proposal, even if he wanted to support him, he won't support the corrupt men in Lord Hector's faction, at least as he has already understood the meaning of His Majesty. Chapter 276. Minister Joel smiled at Plato, thought, I would have liked to impeach that arrogant brat Erwin, but that guy has the support of Plato and Haas who won't let me impeach him. And since I want a smooth session today, I better not target him today. Duke Norman too was smiling as he understood that a lot of ministers were not going to object to the proposal even if someone put a knife on their throats after looking at their behavior. Duke Norman thought, it seems profits and power are always eternal interests. Though no one expressed their thoughts, their body language and eyes are speaking everything. After 30 minutes, the Imperial Court Administrator, Lord Roman, started the afternoon hearing. Administrator Roman looked sternly and asked everyone, "How many of you approve the previous proposal made by Minister Joel and Minister Plato? Please speak and give your opinions frankly." One by one a lot of ministers started giving their approvals. This time it was the neutral camp which tilted in favor of Minister Plato and Joel. The administrator nodded and then asked again, "How many of you object? Please speak." This time only a few military faction leaders and the ministers under Prince Hector raised their objection because of the short time required for the peace deal. Damn traitors! At this time Prince Hector was quite shocked and angry at the reaction of his ministers. The top ministers on his side abstained from giving their opinions as this rejection would decide their political career. Alistair meanwhile expected this result as he sighed after watching his master's mediocrity when it came to this political matter. Alistair thought as he looked at this session and his master, "I guess master is driven by his emotions when it comes to Skye and Lord John. This will be detrimental for his future if I don't control him for now." Meanwhile, all the other ministers abstained on giving approval as well as rejection, which concluded on passing the above resolution. King Lionheart smiled and spoke, "This peace trade deal will be approved because of its great significance and also because of the approval by Imperial Court. A lot of people have died and now it is the time to stop and rectify our previous mistakes. I don't think we want to open another war theater where we will lose a significant amount of soldiers. This deal will strengthen our relationship and create peace while at the same time help Baron Mendez to get back his domain. And the medicines alone provided by Lord John will have a significant change in the kingdom. I hope all the ministers and nobles support this will." The administrator Roman gave his stamp and sign after taking signatures of ministers and nobles who gave their approval previously. He passed the documents to Royal Palace's butlers so that he can pass the documents to the king for signature and kept one copy for himself. Roman nodded and spoke after the resolution was passed, "We will continue with normal procedures of Imperial Court. Is there anyone who wants to raise their petitions? Please come forward." At this time a middle-aged bureaucrat raised his hand as he looked at the administrator and spoke, "I plead with Lord Administrator Roman to hear this subject out. However, this subject will offend a lot of men when he speaks his mind." Roman nodded and spoke, "Please continue and be at ease. As long as you have enough proof and evidence, the person you want to impeach will be given his punishment and you will be protected by the Imperial Court and rewarded for your bravery. However, if this impeachment is based on false rumors then you have to be ready for consequences." Bureaucrat nodded and spoke, "This subject feels relieved after hearing Lord Roman out. This minister has been working as a vice director at the Water Logistics Department in Capital for the last 7 years. However, there is one thing I have noticed and always feel grieved about it after watching the pain of commoners. A lot of nobles and bureaucrats who lived in Capital understood as soon as the middle-aged bureaucrat mentioned the Water Logistics Department. Meanwhile Marquis Polo had a pale face. Roman too smiled as he understood and spoke, "Continue, don't stop." The bureaucrat nodded and continued. This bureaucrat for long had collected evidence and proofs against Marquis Polo's nephew who is the director of the Water Logistics Department in the capital. According to the Imperial Court, people have to pay 1 tael of copper for 10 liters of water which is used for transportation costs in the capital by our department. However, Marquis Polo's nephew using the power of his uncles and father for long sold the water in capital at 10 taels of copper for 10 liters. First, he sold all the water to his own company and then his own company sold the water at 10 times the price to commoners who couldn't afford to dig wells in their courtyard. In essence, their company only provides services but they have never provided any invoices for the services they provided. Most of the invoices were dodgy in nature and were completely fake when investigated by the finance department. The poor people who formed small groups to save costs and traveled to river for collecting water were being harassed by Marquis' men after they started selling water at 2 to 3 taels of copper in the name of unlawful distribution and high prices to arrest them. The Imperial Court doesn't sue people and businessmen who sold that water under 1 tael, but those who sold over 1 tael were legally liable, and this created a flaw that gave all the powers to the water logistics departments in the cities. These are the documents and signatures of 20% of the commoners in the capital city who bravely came forward and wanted to file a suit against Marquis and his nephew but were too afraid because of their power. I had once asked one of my subordinates to tell Marquis Polo about the activities of his nephew, but he too was soon dismissed by the head after 3 months in the name of coming late at work while he would always come in time, unlike some people. After that incident, for years I have collected evidence and finally presented it to the court. I also hope that there is a change in the law so that powers are divided. I hope that people should be allowed to sell at the price that they feel is correct, which would inevitably create competition, and this would stop the exploitation of commoners by those in power, and if they provide value-added services, it would be better. You could also see that during the dismissal my colleague had written in his employment certificate that he was unfairly dismissed by the director due to his company's interests, and had clearly pointed out that Marquis Polo and his family had a hand in his dismissal, which was ignored by a certain organization. I hope the Imperial Court and Lord Administrator to judge this matter. The bureaucrat smiled and looked at Finance Minister with grateful eyes while he stared at Marquis Polo with vengeance. Boom! There was a hubbub as soon as he finished his speech to Lord Roman. A lot of people understood that today there would be a political storm. Even the people who had clean hands were worrying about their political future. A lot of ministers under Minister Plato and Minister Joel eyes shone as they spoke to each other. One of Marquis under Joel spoke with a solemn and righteous tone. This minister always had his doubts as he had heard rumors, but after hearing this righteous bureaucrat who has come fully prepared, I hope your Lord Administrator and your Majesty also look at the Ministry of Personnel who dismissed his colleague. I think this too is related to Marquis Polo. I am sure he would have bribed him to dismiss him. I also hope that the wronged personnel is given compensation and again welcomed back with dignity and honor for his bravery. As for the compensation, we can recover that from Marquis Polo's nephew. I think he gobbled up quite a lot of money in the last 12 years as a director from the commoners. After hearing that the Ministry of Personnel would be investigated, a minister under Prince Hector had a pale face as it was his man who dismissed the said colleague. Another person from Minister Plato's faction spoke, I agree with Lord Marquis. I also hope there is a change in the laws to facilitate the commoners and create competition so that they are not exploited. Baron Jules under Prince Hector, who had clean hands, spoke, My lord, we can't make impromptu decisions without any investigation. Joel smiled and thought, finally this old man takes the bait. You were quite cocky and arrogant for the previous 8 years after getting under the wings of Prince Hector. Now I will see how you will escape this net. Chapter 277. At this time Minister Joel smiled and spoke, Baron Jules, as far as I know, you are the head of the infrastructure department and completed a lot of important projects in the last 2 decades. Everyone here knows that you are quite an achiever, but currently a lot of works are only under progress from the time period you had given us when the projects were started. It has already been 2 years late. I understand your circumstances as you are quite old and a lot of people previously had to be transferred previously due to the rebellion of Lord John for making ballistas and reinforcing forts, but this might be having a bad effect on your body. To keep better care of your body, why don't you go to the northern domain and manage your fief leisurely while improving the infrastructure at Duke Norman's domain at the same time? You see, Duke Norman has already expanded a lot of land in the north. What do all of my colleagues think? Understanding that Minister Joel was in fact chasing out Baron Jules out of capital and power center of Elias politics instead of praising him in the name of old age and delay of work, which was quite common due communication problems. Everyone had their eyes sparkling after watching the scheme of Minister Joel. One of the ministers that was secretly under his faction smiled and spoke, True, Baron Jules has given quite a lot of his blood, sweat, and time to the capital. I think he should return to his family while enriching his homeland and village. He can also help Duke Norman in the new projects for the next few years. This can become a pillar of Elias in the next 20 years. One of the ministers almost laughed after hearing the last argument. Another minister from Plato's faction who had problem with Baron Jules spoke bluntly, I think Minister Jules has quite a bias against Lord John, as I saw from his earlier interactions. Previously 3 months back I had a drink at the Royal Restaurant in the capital with him when he spoke that Lord John is just an upstart after he was made a count. He spoke that those cement roads which quite a few merchants proposed to build were rejected by him to make that brat understand the immensity of heaven's eye. For offending bigwigs. He spoke that the previous proposal was rejected because not enough time had passed after the construction of those roads in the southern domain and it would at least take a year to inspect those roads. And I think this bias can affect our cooperation when it comes to the construction sector with Lord John, which would inevitably delay a lot of construction projects. As for the authenticity of my statement, a lot of ministers and bureaucrats were present in the restaurant there that day who can verify it. One of them is Lord Rufus. Lord Rufus only nodded so as to verify the authenticity of the previous statement and did not speak any more. He was from the neutral faction, so he did not want to get involved in this power struggle between Lord Joel and Lord Hector. Baron Jules had a pale face as he understood that his political career in the capital city would be over after today's fiasco. He roared and spoke, "You are slandering me. I have always been professional when it came to my work. You are unnecessarily twisting my words." Though I spoke those words, but when I rejected the proposal, Lord John didn't understand the rules and regulations when it came to inspections, as we usually inspected new infrastructures for 1 to 2 years before it was passed according to the standard procedures. The minister from Plato's faction shrugged his shoulders and spoke, "Well, I am only speaking facts. You yourself know that you have a bias against Lord John since you lost your third kid in the previous war. Don't tell me you don't hate Lord John and this won't affect our cooperation with Sky, as you are in charge of infrastructure in capital and the surrounding areas. I guess Lord John deliberately sent you his proposal so as create problems for you. I guess he one-upped you this time around. You had to keep your lips tightly shut if that was the case." Prince Hector had a pale face that was full of anger. He saw that a lot of men under him who had clean hands were trembling after watching the previous fiasco. Prince Hector looked angrily at Minister Joel and Minister Plato as if he would eat them alive if he got the chance. Prince Hector was just about to lash at them for this conspiracy due to his change in emotions when Duke Norman took him under his control. He spoke in a solemn, cold voice, "Your Highness, you have to bear the pain this time around. You should see that His Majesty is definitely prepared to pass the peace trade deal and demote anyone who blocks his path. It seems it is related to Radiant Crutch and we can't stop that. If you lash out right now, your reputation among the nobility will be greatly damaged, while at the same time His Majesty may kick you out of the court today. And Minister Joel and Minister Plato too are attacking us because of their political interests in this deal, so we must be cautious of their schemes. Minister Joel has a previous feud with you when his previous assistant offended you and you used the Bureau of Personnel to dismiss him, so you must be extra careful. I guess he is still holding that grudge, as that assistant was quite a capable man. As for Minister Plato, it seems he doesn't want any conflict with the Sky Kingdom for the next 5 years and is willing to offend you. I guess he won't be supporting you for the throne. Prime Minister and Duke Blackwolf's men are still composed and we shouldn't offend them." Bearing the rage, Hector called Alistair and spoke, "Prepare a better defense for those who have clean hands. Ask them personally about the problems they faced with regards to that upstart, or are there any schemes which are likely to affect them?" Alistair nodded and headed to make preparations for those men. Prince Jabal smiled and spoke, "This prince too agrees. Baron Jules, I think it would be better for you to manage your fief and do the projects at Northern Domain. You should give more opportunity to the young ones. Isn't that correct, my colleagues? What do you think?" Another minister from the neutral camp spoke, "This minister thinks that Lord Jules is quite old and should take some rest in the countryside and give a chance to the young generation. If he gets sick suddenly during an important project and if it suddenly stops, then it would be quite a disaster in waiting." 6 top ministers too joined in the demotion of Baron Jules, which swiftly concluded with no one objecting except the ones who were being impeached today. At this time a department head came and gave his report to the administrator regarding the signatures. After confirming the authenticity of signatures, Marquis Polo's nephew too was impeached with a hefty fine, while the bureaucrat who was unfairly impeached previously was given a big compensation which was received by his family. It was later revealed that Lord John had already recruited the bureaucrats who were fair but unfairly impeached during the last half-year into his domain for administrative matters. A lot of people at the imperial court gasped as they understood that Lord John had made an ample amount of preparations and schemed before he had dared to openly offend and rebel against the royal family. A lot of people agreed with the impeachments while another lot of people gasped as they saw this new political storm in Elias, which would be demoting a lot of people in the court today to show their sincerity to Skye and Lord John. In this way, a lot of military personnel under Plato too were affected, as some were too stubborn and were against Skye openly, or some were too neck-deep with Prince Hector. Only some with power like General Irwin saved their assess this time around. Baron Jules was immediately sent to the northern domain under Duke Norman out of the imperial capital, while Marquis Polo's nephew was immediately dismissed with 2 times the fine he generated over all the years. Or he had to pay 1 time the fine with 1 year of imprisonment, while at the same time they would take back his noble title, making him a commoner. As long as he didn't pay 2 times the amount, he and his family would remain commoners. A lot of ministers smiled as they understood that for a lot of nobles their noble title was more important than money, and in this way Minister Joel was sucking money out of a lot of bureaucrats and nobles today who were under investigation. The Ministry of Personnel too had a lot of changes who used too much their power, while at the same time today was the day where many of the laws were changed which were with fewer flaws, as after they saw the laws of Skye and North Frontier Domain. The spies from all the foreign countries too were shocked as they saw the political storm which swept Elias apart. Prince Hector and Prince Felix's power in the court had reduced a lot in a single day, while other princes in the neutral camp had increased their power as others took positions which were dismissed, such as Director of Infrastructure Sector in Capital was going to be governed by a guy from the neutral camp. Prince Hector grumbled as he looked at years of his work being undone in a single day. Today 1/5 of his power was reduced by Minister Joel and Plato. Looking at Lionheart, he felt as if he was an abandoned son right now. Prince Hector raged and grumbled as he looked at Minister Joel, Plato, Haas, and others. All of these damn traitors should just die. They dare block my path to revenge and throne. I would make all of them pay in the future for the transgressions which took place today. As for Jabal, he too would die a bloody death for humiliating me. He dares to act arrogant in front of me. This time that rebel had prepared quite a lot of pits for my men. 10 men got unfairly demoted while they never took bribes, nor did they have any sort of corruption. Meanwhile, Duke Norman and Alastair sighed as Duke Norman thought, it seems Queen Cecilia's family wasn't involved in this power struggle, as they had already made their stance clear to Minister Joel. Making Minister Joel your enemy is quite risky. He looks at his enemy for years waiting to get a perfect opportunity, and when he strikes big. Prime Minister Haas smiled as he looked at Joel and spoke, it seems Minister Joel still hasn't lost his edge after all these years. You are still as sharp as ever. Finance Minister Joel smiled as he spoke, you jest me, Lord. When it comes to Lord Haas I will always pale a shade. Haas spoke in a very soft voice, it seems you were teaching His Highness quite a good lesson today on politics. From the looks, he has lost quite a bit of power in the court and the favor of His Majesty. What do you say, my lord? Joel only smiled as he didn't dare to comment on this subject, as his comments could be exploited in the future. On the surface, it looked like Joel was doing his all to get credit on pushing forward these policies with Plato, as he was in dire condition after the war, but at the same time, he was avenging his previous humiliation in court 4 years ago against Prince Hector for dismissing his assistant. It looked like a very friendly conversation on the surface, but the old fogies here knew that they were always polishing their daggers to stab them back, as they were bitter rivals in the past for the Prime Minister's seat. Joel thought, this old fogey is still trying to probe me. I better not give him any information on this deliberate scheme, or else all the blame will fall on me. Joel vaguely answered as he moved forward with his investigation, I thought Prince Hector would have contacted you yesterday after hearing about my proposal, but it seems that was not the case. It's quite busy today. Let's do our best to complete all the investigation. As for the previous storm, I am only doing my best for Elias, and naturally, I will expect the best from all the colleagues in the imperial court. Has thought as Joel left to meet other ministers, I wonder if he is still vying for my post. It's good that I didn't make any decision in the previous war and was privately against it, or I would have daggers at my back from all the sides, and especially Joel. Today, his performance was quite good, as even I had to support him to make my stand clear. As for Prince Hector, it looks like he had this information yesterday but still didn't seek me out to retain the power of his men. From the rumors, he is as arrogant as ever. Anyway, Prince Hector has lost the favor of the imperial court and his majesty, so it will be easy for me to work for now. That brat is quite a headache, and you always have to speak carefully around him. And I better not get entangled with him right now, as it seems his majesty is doing this to teach him a harsh lesson. Chapter 278. Meanwhile, near the imperial court, the spies from Sky 2 were a bit stunned but had expected surprises in Elias politically as informed by their superiors. One of the head spies nodded his head and spoke to his mates. You can confirm to Lord Grey and Lord Taylor about today's decisions taken in the imperial court of Elias. Prince Hector's power has been reduced, and it seems Lord Plato is sending us quite a message by demoting 10 officials and imprisoning 5 officials on bribery cases from Prince Hector's faction. As for total demotions, it looks like 23 in total. There are also demotions from Prince Felix's faction. It seems this is done to aim the Radiant Church. His assistant nodded as they immediately report the current situation to their superiors. King Ludwin's spies meanwhile squinted their eyebrows as they understood the implications and message behind today's political storm in Elias. One of the men took a parchment and wrote a letter for Internal Minister Mernat about today's matter. The man murmured as he wrote the letter, "It seems today's matters are quite serious and indicates a certain alignment between Lord John's interests. I guess they have a deeper deal as well. Anyway, the mistrust between both countries won't be gone for a long time." Meanwhile, near the Elias court, a lot of ministers and bureaucrats were gossiping on previous dismissals in private and about the big changes in power. One of the ministers spoke with a big smile. "I never thought that the Bureau of Personnel had such big corruption going on for this long. Now, it is good that we can cut some of their wings by bringing in some laws to rein them in." Another bureaucrat who had previously offended the vice-head from the Bureau of Personnel smiled a bit and spoke about his plans. "Yes, the newly created Political Inspection Department, especially for the Ministry of Personnel, is quite good for us to keep them in check, as all the departments can write them letters so that they can investigate them if some corruption is going on." Meanwhile, he himself thought, "I better get those sons and nephews from our family to be recruited in this Ministry of Inspection to get more power. Meanwhile, we can scheme against the vice-head of the Ministry of Personnel to be impeached for his corrupt practices." He and the other heads at the Ministry of Personnel might be feeling quite a lot of heat today. Similar conversations and schemes were being carried out by ministers and bureaucrats outside the imperial court. At this moment Duke Norman had a thought to gain His Majesty's favour and was writing a petition which will be given in a few days to the court officially. Duke Norman's assistant thought and asked, "My lord, what is this petition related to?" "I don't think we would want to poke a hornet's nest by writing a petition since there was such a big political storm today." Duke Norman smiled and spoke his mind after watching today's fiasco. "Haha, don't worry kid, since this time the imperial court has started targeting the Radiant Church's finances, then I too won't be going against this trend. It is related to what my spies in Lord John's domain had observed long ago. I hoped that His Majesty would set up a research institute in the healthcare sector like the one in Lord John's domain from half of the proceeds of profits of medicine sale we do in the future. This institute can be formed by private businesses or the royal family itself. Like John's Institute, we should hire podiwaners, herbalists, magicians, etc. to conduct research and experiments to make effective medicines like Sky." Lord John was quite perceptive in creating such an institution. "Even if we get unworthy results, we can still get some results which can be useful in the future. So even if we create medicine for one of the diseases, it will be helpful for us." The assistant's eyes started sparkling and spoke, "Lord, then why don't we do it from the profits we earn by selling it in our domain?" Duke smiled and spoke, "Kid, I know what you are thinking. I am not doing this to earn money currently. I am doing this to earn political points in the imperial court and also earn the favor of His Majesty. Come and take this petition and hand it over to the administrator today only. But if it doesn't work, as the royal family might not have enough funds, then I may try to make a business collaboration with other nobles and merchants to reduce my loss in the initial funding for research. Because from what I know from my spies, that kid is quite a genius disciple of that old hag Melanie, and it was actually him who created those medicines, so it would be quite difficult for mediocre people. We can't fight with him in a fair competition, but we can try to poach his researchers and also try to plant spies to rob their research data after the peace trade deal. Also, if we get some results, then the royal family would certainly support us via giving orders and raising taxes in the name of fair competition. The assistant nodded as he understood Norman's plan and exclaimed, "Ah, now I understand. No wonder you were always an astute politician, uncle." Duke Norman spoke harshly as soon as he heard his nephew, "Don't call me uncle at the imperial court. It will be problematic for you in the future. Now hurry up and give the envelope to Lord Roman immediately." The nephew hesitated a bit and spoke, "My lord, it seems you are quite respectful to Lord John nowadays after his successful rebellion. Previously, you only had disdain for him when we were at war with him." Norman thought deeply and spoke, "Well, now he has enough capital and qualifications to gain my respect. Even the Lord Grand Duke, my father, felt the same after watching his courage as well as the political scheme laid out by that brat from the day he became a lord. The actions where we thought of him as foolish was something he deliberately did to fool us. If we were in his position, then we would have lost the war and the royal family would have seized our technologies like the Lore family. Anyway, go and deliver the petition to Lord Roman so that he can review it, present it to the imperial court." Chapter 279. After getting the administrator Roman's refusal, Duke Norman's assistant immediately informed the Duke about the refusal. The Duke was quite confused, as he knew that his petition was quite good and hence wanted to sought Lord Roman for an explanation. He thought as he saw that there was no official letter of refusal, "I don't think this proposal should be refused without any explanation. This is profitable for both the royal family and should build a foundation to counterattack the Radiant Church's finances. There might be something that they can't discuss openly. I better go and meet him." Duke Norman wanted an explanation and hence decided to meet him immediately the same day. Lord Roman shook his head and spoke to Duke Norman quite frankly, as he understood the intentions of Duke Norman's today's behavior. "Lord Duke, it is not that Duke Norman's proposal is not good. It is just that we have different plans in using the funds from medicine sales. At the suggestion of Prime Minister and Defense Minister Plato, currently, we are going to set up military research facilities and departments for those things called guns and other weapons that were used by the Sky in the previous war to prepare for our future. In my view, your proposal is too good to be rejected, which will divert our funds from medicinal sales and hence make a big change in our plans. Additionally, by building a pharma research center, we will draw the gaze of Radiant Church and become their target." Lord Roman thought deeply as he looked at Duke Norman. "I guess he is quite worried because of Lord Hector's loss in favor as well as Lord Hector's difficult to manage character. I guess there won't be problem if I divulge some of the secrets to him and shake some hearts and alliances. It was good that I rejected his petition to indirectly summon him." Lord Roman sighed a bit as he drank wine and spoke, "Also, Defense Minister Plato thinks that we may face a civil war in the next 5 to 20 years, so we have to strengthen ourselves. And the likely causes for civil war would be Prince Hector, Prince Felix, Prince Lukov, and Prince Jabal, now that almost everyone has made their moves, and not to forget the Radiant Church, which is the biggest threat to Elias. We came to this conclusion after a deep and thorough assessment." He sighed as he continued solemnly, "Defense Minister Plato thinks that we must be prepared to face an invasion from Sky when they consolidate their resources, i.e. most likely in 2 to 3 years if they have expansionist policies, and hence the Council of Elders too wanted a peace deal which can last 5 to 10 years at least, so that we can recover our power to give them back for our previous humiliation. In case Sky breaks the deal, we can rally the other bordering countries in our defense, as they too might be feeling danger from Sky, and currently, we are sure that all the other bordering countries feel the same from Sky. So in the case of a peace deal, we think that Skye would only make their move when Elias is in a civil war, most probably in the name of protecting their interests. Their current ambitions and goals are most likely internal stability, gaining control of resources in their newly occupied areas and unifying the people of different races so that they can prepare for a future war. John could most likely enter into a political marriage to unify different races or bring in some other new revolutionary laws like the one where he banned slavery in his domain. Because of these actions, the common populace both here and other countries are quite touched and baffled, as they never knew what is freedom. The elders, king, and other important ministers too have come to the conclusion that the law banning slavery of all the races was quite a big factor when people of the North Frontier town rallied behind him in his rebellion when we placed export sanctions on them. In fact, many feel that it was the common populace manipulated by their media that encouraged Lord John for a rebellion. Well, their media reported the truth and Lord John used it for his political goals. Both Duke Norman and Roman sighed as they understood the courage, determination, and ambitions behind John's actions when he rebelled. Duke Norman thought, "I guess Lord Hector's actions only fueled the grievances of the common populace when a whole village was massacred, and hence the rebellion when sanctions on food was made, and this also made Elias lose a lot of face. And this loss in face in public also led us to go to war because of the economic benefits from his technologies." Prime Minister Hasse, who came in with his proposals, saw the Imperial Court Administrator and Lord Duke Norman were having quite a serious discussion and stopped by to greet them. After Hasse's arrival, Roman told Hasse about Lord Duke's proposal, which made him understand the situation. After hearing Roman, Hasse nodded and spoke the plans to Duke. "Yes, currently we are facing a big problem for future when it comes to military might, and hence the current decisions. However, the nobles can set up their private medical companies for research, which the royal family can support you if you get good results." Duke Norman too didn't refute and understood the power dynamics of Elias currently. Duke Norman sighed and spoke, "So as I guessed, Lord John didn't occupy any extra territory as he didn't have enough resources, and he might want to build his reputation as a good sovereign to other countries so that other countries don't keep their guard up. I guess he is also not occupying any territory for peace and give Elias some face, making our populace believe that they are afraid of dragon knights." Prime Minister Hasse smiled as he saw Norman's helplessness and spoke, "Nah, you don't understand his mentality currently. From what I think, he is currently focusing on building the foundation of his country and investing a lot in civil works. And from all his previous actions, I can say that he likes a very sturdy foundation, as we saw in the previous war where he had minimal casualties while we lost more than 80,000 people. From your worried expression, it seems you two are in a dilemma because of your daughter's marriage. I think I can help you in this matter. As far as our current threats are concerned, it is certainly the Radiant Church, since they have received an oracle. Anyway, I will also forward your proposal to His Majesty when I meet him, so we can pass a bill for setting up private research facilities." Duke Norman sighed and spoke gratefully as he remembered his father's words on Lord Hasse, "Thank you, Lord. I wonder how you can help me." Prime Minister Hasse looked around as he saw other people coming and spoke, "I think we should talk at some other place since a lot of people are just coming in. We would like to bid you farewell, Lord Roman." Roman too smiled as he nodded and thought, "It seems Lord Norman hopes to end Mary's marriage with Lord Hector, since he has acquired quite a lot of land in north and hopes for very less conflict with Skye right now, but Lord Hector's presence might change a lot of things at the border and also at trade, since he has a grudge against Lord John. As for Lord Hasse's motive in helping the Norman family, I can only guess. It is most likely to do with Lord Hector and keeping him within his reign." Lord Duke understandably nodded as both of them headed for a restaurant to continue their talks. Chapter 280. In a private room in the restaurant, Lord Prime Minister and Duke Norman got to business after offering their greetings. Hasse drank his cup of wine and spoke solemnly, "It seems Lord Duke has finally made his decision. Are you sure you won't regret it? Because you will make an enemy Prince Hector in the future." Hasse meanwhile thought as he looked back to today's events in the imperial court, "It is anyway better to break the alliance between Duke Norman and Prince Hector. I am sure Prince Hector is harboring a grudge against me for first supporting the peace trade deal previously. There is also a favor that I owe to the Grand Duke of Norman family, so I should pay it back today. Duke thought a bit and decided to bear out some of his intentions. Well, I already decided when I decided to meet you. I do have my reservations when it comes to one man in Lord Hector's camp. But the thing is, Lord Hector has a lot of personality flaws which is very difficult to manage. I think you already saw Lord Hector's behavior in the court session in the morning. When it comes to his enemies, he can't think with a clear mind when he is enraged. However, this engagement of Mary and Prince Hector was made by Father and His Majesty, so it is a peculiar situation for us currently. Has nodded and spoke. I guess you are worried about Alistair, who trained under Lord Lukov for a brief period when he was young? Well, he does have his credentials when it comes to scheming and saving Hector's ass, as well as his martial talent. For Alistair, you can buy him at a great price if Prince Hector is neck-deep in debt. As far as I know, Prince Hector doesn't feel anything of him, he is just better than an ant for him. My only suggestion is that you should strictly keep a business relationship with Lord Hector and wait for him to make a mistake before you reveal your intentions, as you are currently tied to Lord Hector's pirate ship. I would just give you one suggestion, i.e. you should follow the lead of Queen Cecilia's family and create an artificial public distance by using Mary with him in a close private relationship so that he won't doubt you. I am sure you noticed Queen Cecilia and her family's distancing from Prince Hector in today's session in the court. From what I know, they took this decision after they received Lord Endo's letter from Skye and also their future plans. Has sighed and continued to speak. As for funding from the royal family in your previous research plan in regards to medicines, the royal family is going to highly fund experiments for making prototypes of those weapons called guns, and also cultivate spy merchants who can try to get their hands on those weapons from Skye, since the demons and dwarves too would have started their research and spying activities, so we need to be prepared for future confrontations at our borders. In my opinion, the last war was only a warm-up. The next war will certainly shake up the whole continent when more of such weapons are developed by other countries, and I am sure even other continents would be shaken by this war. So currently we don't have any intentions of conflict with Skye, or we would most likely get swallowed up by the demons and beasts in the western borders. Also, Elias is currently quite unstable because of the previous war. A lot of groups are planning uprisings and power grab with the funding of the Fire Abyss Kingdom and the Radiant Church. The most unstable groups currently are Prince Lukov, Duke Fjord, and the Radiant Church with Prince Felix. However, the Radiant Church poses the biggest challenge to us currently. The entry of Skye in Elias with regards trade is also to fill the power vacuum in Elias after our loss and to nullify Radiant Church's influence. This will unconsciously increase the conflict between Skye and the Radiant Church, which will inevitably divert the focus of Radiant Church towards Skye. Duke Norman deeply nodded as he understood the significance of this message from Hass and spoke, "Thank you, Lord Hass, for his continuous help. Our family would never forget this important piece of information." Hass thought of the past and spoke, "It is only because your father the Grand Duke had helped me in the past that I am helping you right now. Additionally, I had previous engagements with him, and hence I am only fulfilling my previous promise to him." Duke nodded and asked, "Lord Hass, I am quite confused because of the actions of Lord John in the previous war. From what I know, Lord John's army was quite strong enough to occupy Baron Mendez's domain as well as the other nearby domains, so why didn't he occupy and consolidate it? Additionally, if I or any other noble was in his place, then we would have certainly occupied the eastern port city of Mendez's domain, as it is quite a gold pot since a lot of trade with dwarves, beasts, and elves take place over there." Hass nodded as he deeply thought and spoke, "Even I was quite confused with his actions. Plato and I were prepared for the worst when we lost on both the theaters, i.e. sea as well as land, for a defense. My most likely guess is that he didn't want to confront the Dragon Knights if they officially consolidated Dolores, which will most likely expose the weakness of his weapons as well as a shortage of troops to Dwarven Kingdom, Fire Abyss Kingdom, and us the humans at Elias, as it would also expand the war in all the directions. And that is also the reason why they didn't chase down our army to expand their borders beyond Mendez's domain or chase down the dwarves till their port. And the second reason might be the number of combatants that they could deploy. The third reason might be the chaos created by the insurgents of Radiant Church and Elias in the occupied territories, which will only increase the number of casualties, so he most likely made a favorable deal with Baron Mendez and directly earn his benefits and at the same time earning his favor. And the last reason might be that he deliberately didn't occupy it as he has bigger plans for the future. However, those technological changes have certainly changed the future of warfare, and from now on, normal civilians will also become a big backbone in the army. The difference is that we at Elias cultivated individuals to prepare for war, while Lord John cultivated an army and team of strategists, as seen from their actions when they faced Black Death disease as well. From this peace trade deal, I can see that he has bigger ambitions, since he has gone to such lengths just to get people to strengthen Sky for future wars. Well, we too are going to extract benefits from Sky in exchange for people. And we anyway have a lot of it. Additionally, your previous point that they are giving back the land so that we can keep our face is also true to stabilize the internal turmoil of Elias. Duke Norman nodded as he understood the importance of this information and thought, it seems I will tread on thin ice from now on, since I have to balance my position with Sky as well as Elias, or else our borders will get hot, where I will certainly face annihilation from Friedrich and John's forces and lose land slowly. And also I don't want the help from the royal family in keeping my borders. Duke Norman brought a paper and gave it to Haas as he spoke with a very serious expression, Lord Haas, I hope this piece of information is enough and can help you. We have just discovered a plot from the Radiant Church that they are going to go with the policies of stopping slavery of humans to rally more people. Currently, they are also working on creating a magic that can unseal a slave without any backlash like the one that was created by Sky. I think you know where this proposed policy will go. I think this move of theirs is to oppose our previous decision to send people to Sky and to keep hostilities with Sky. I can see that with the influence they have over masses, they might also rebel with Prince Felix as a center. Prime Minister Haas was quite startled as he saw the official internal letter of Radiant Church and understood the implications. He spoke with a calm but ruthless gaze, abolishing slavery is a no-go for Elias. This is tied with the interests of all the nobles. And even if we abolish slavery, ministers tied with noble families will undoubtedly oppose it, and this also might create a civil war because of the big business interests of the nobles. Quite a low hand by the Radiant Church. It seems they are preparing for a civil war, and that too on a bigger scale, and will prepare for a few years before they start. And from the looks of it, the Radiant Church is intending to increase the conflict with other races. I want to know who in the Radiant Church proposed this plan and when was it proposed. Duke Norman sighed and spoke, today a lot of heads from the Radiant Church were present in the capital because of today's political fiasco, and this news was only found today by my family's spies. And it seems this proposal was given by Pope David's first disciple and also the next designated pope by Lord Irmela directly via his oracle. He took this decision after the court decided to make a peace trade deal with King John. From what I know, they will be proposing the abolishment of slavery step by their spies using Lord John's name and use the previous loss in the war to undermine the royal family. Meanwhile, the priests and bishop will only seek the abolishment of slavery for humans publicly when asked by commoners in private. And there is also other news which can be significant or insignificant for us. Prime Minister Haas nodded and spoke, continue. I am listening. Norman nodded and continued. The Radiant Church is intending to ban theatre, dramas, and other forms of arts as it falls apart the propaganda and narrative of the Radiant Church. This is because Lord John has funded a lot of theatres and other artists indirectly so that they can expose the Radiant Church's inhuman activities and create animosity among the commoners for the Radiant Church. Previously we too were intending to ban theatres, but because of the ease of tensions between Sky and Elias after Lord Plato's talks with Minister Taylor, the plan was squashed. Additionally, not a lot of people are educated in Elias, and hence the effect of the newspapers which we will distribute will reduce drastically, and hence they have only banned theatres so it doesn't reach the illiterate masses. And my reason for keeping distance with Lord Hector is because he supports this ban and is trying to court the men from Radiant Church but doesn't do so openly as he fears making Prince Lukov his enemy. Prime Minister Haas nodded satisfyingly as he finally understood why Duke Norman had a big change in his policies towards Prince Hector. He nodded as he spoke. It seems I still owe your family a favor, Duke Norman, for this important piece of information. I guess your old father didn't pick you as a successor for no reason. An ability to unlearn things to learn new things is quite hard for stubborn people, but stubbornness is deeply rooted in living beings with high status and only reality makes them understand it. And those who can't unlearn the bad are fated to be doomed in some part of history. I guess the previous war changed your views and made you think practically. Well, this change in thinking is still good for your family. My only advice for you would be to keep a balance between the two factions in your northern domain, i.e. faction of Prince Hector and the faction opposing Prince Hector, or the ones that are interested in trade with Sky. You should know that any lord wouldn't like to live in high debts and be at other lords' mercy. Your subtle change in policies will be noted by the ministers in Elias and you will face fewer problems in borders against Sky. One good policy can be reduction of tariffs at borders, since you are running low on money because of the previous war. This will also allay the fears among the nobles and also stimulate trade, which will inevitably increase tax income. Now I will take my leave and go to meet His Majesty for now. Don't look at me like that. I too was quite stubborn a long time ago, and facing reality made me change my mindset. There is also another plan which can help you in the long term. But I don't know if you would like it. Norman nodded for Haas to continue. Haas smiled a bit and spoke, a secret marriage alliance with the Fire Abyss Kingdom. If you have a good daughter, then you should try courting Prince Chad to be engaged with one of your daughters, or a capable heir, then try courting Princess Trish. However, this will undoubtedly enrage Lord Hector, so you must take this decision carefully and also execute it carefully in secret. Anyway, let's leave for now. As if a star sparkling in the dark, Lord Norman thought deeply, why did I never thought of an alliance with demons or other races? I guess I always narrowed my perspectives politically. This way I can also solve my problems at the borders in case Sky tries to invade my domain. Now that I think critically, it seems I had disdain for other races subconsciously due to the Radiant Church. Duke Norman nodded deeply and spoke, thank you very much, Lord Haas, for enlightening me. Both Duke Norman and Minister Haas nodded and prepared to leave to finish their duties. Haas thought as he left for the imperial court, I hope this scheme of mine can change the fate of Elias and divert it towards the Fire Abyss Kingdom. Even if Lord John remained loyal, he would have inevitably rebelled, as Prince Hector had become his enemy in his early days, which meant that they would clash even if Lord John became a duke, and this is also the reason why the elders and ministers didn't favor to support Lord John in the clash between him and Fjord. Meanwhile, Duke Norman had a smile on his face because of his chance encounter with Minister Haas, with meaningful talks was quite successful for his future plans. Duke's nephew spoke as he saw the Duke, it seems you had quite a successful meeting, uncle. So have they decided to propose your policies and go with it? Duke didn't mind his nephew's non-etiquette behavior as he spoke with a smile, nope, but we did gain some benefits. Come back to the manor with me. I need to inform Lord Father and elders of our gains and losses. Duke gleefully thought, I should secretly arrange a meeting with Prince Chad now that Lord Friedrich is out of his domain and inflame his anger against Blucia family for trying to marry off Princess Diana. If my scheme succeeds, then I can give a big blow to Sky for certain and at the same time increase the power of our family. I should deeply discuss this with elders for our future course of action.